Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everybody. Today we're going to be tackling something pretty big, pretty immense, actually, the world of Waqf properties in India.
Yeah, we're talking about a lot of properties here.
I mean, you're talking like, what, almost 1 million?
Yeah.
8.72 lakh properties, over 38 lakh acres?
Yeah.
It's hard to even picture that much land.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about mosques, graveyards, orphanages, a lot of land dedicated to religious and charitable purposes.
Yeah, so how on earth do you even begin to manage something like this? I mean, it's like a country unto itself, right?
Yeah, it really is. And that's why we're here today, to sort of unpack how India actually manages this huge amount of property, especially as it relates to its 200 million Muslims.
Right. And it's not just like, oh, there's a bunch of land. There's this whole legal framework around it, right?
Exactly. It's a fascinating intersection of law, social dynamics, religion.
It's super complex, and so that's why we've gone and really dug in.
Yeah.
We've been going through these legislative acts, looking at government press releases, news articles, trying to really understand how these Waqf laws have evolved in India.
Yeah, I mean, especially, with this new Waqf Amendment bill.
Oh, yeah.
The 2025 one.
Yeah, that's been in the news a lot.
It's pretty controversial.
Yeah, and I think our goal today is to just kind of lay it all out, trace the history of these laws, talk about the changes, why are people so upset about this?
Yeah, I think it's important to just understand the context, right?
Right, and make it accessible. Because I was looking through some of this stuff, and I was like, whoa, this is way over my head.
Yeah, it can be dense, for sure.
Yeah, so for our listeners out there, let's start with just the basics. What is a Waqf?
Okay, so a Waqf.
I mean, some people might not even know what that word means.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, in the simplest terms, a Waqf is a dedication of property. And this is according to Muslim law, right? So it's a dedication of property for religious, pious, or charitable purposes.
Okay, so it's not just like any property.
Yeah.
It has to be specifically for these things.
Right, and this is important.
Yeah.
It has to be permanent. So once you dedicate something as Waqf, it can't be sold, repurposed. It's dedicated forever.
Okay, so give us some examples of what kind of properties are we talking about?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, mosques, madrasas, which are like religious schools.
Okay.
Graveyards, orphanages.
Okay, so really essential parts of a community.
Exactly, and you can see why they're so important, especially to the millions of Muslims in India.
Right, so it's a huge deal, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just like a side thing.
Not at all.
So when did people, when did India start to think, okay, we need some laws around this?
Yeah, well, the need for regulation was recognized pretty early on, even before India's independence.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine, right? It's so important socially, religiously, economically. They needed some kind of framework.
So what was the first law that came about?
So one of the first was the Mussalman Waqf Validating Act of 1913.
1913, okay.
So that was, over 100 years ago.
Wow.
And the aim of that act was to it had two main aims.
Okay.
It wanted to allow Muslims to create waqfs for their families, like family waqfs.
Okay.
With the idea that eventually they would also serve a broader purpose, like a charitable purpose.
Got it. Okay.
And secondly, it wanted to improve the management of waqfs, just generally.
Okay, so they were like, this is important. We need to make sure it's being done right.
Exactly. But, looking back, it wasn't that effective in really streamlining things.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was more about, recognizing these family waqfs.
Okay, so it was like a step in the right direction.
Exactly.
But not the whole picture.
Not the whole picture, yeah.
So what came next?
Well, then came the Mussalman Waqf Act of 1923.
Okay.
And that one really focused on accountability and transparency.
Oh.
So they wanted to make sure, that things were being done properly. So they introduced rules for keeping financial records, making sure everything's documented.
Okay, so this is bring in the accountants.
Exactly. More formal oversight.
Okay.
Then a few years later, you have the Mussalman Waqf Validating Act of 1930.
Okay, another validating act.
Another validating act, yeah.
What was this one about?
So this one basically strengthened the legal basis for those family waqfs.
Oh, okay.
So, the 1913 Act allowed them, but this one was like, okay, we're going to make sure they're really solid legally.
Okay, got it.
So it made them less open to challenges.
So that was kind of like the pre-independence setup, right?
Exactly.
3 acts. They're trying to figure this out. It's all pretty new.
Yeah, laying the groundwork.
So what happened after 1947 when India became independent? Did things change?
Oh, yeah. Things definitely change. So the first big piece of legislation after independence was the Waqf Act of 1954.
Okay.
This was a major development, a really big deal. And the aim of this act was to really solidify how these Waqf properties were being administered.
Okay, so it's like, all right, new country, we need to figure this out.
Yeah, fresh start.
New rules.
Yeah, exactly.
What do they come up with?
Well, this is when they created those state Waqf boards.
The SWBs?
Yeah, the SWBs, exactly.
Yeah.
So each state got their own board to oversee the Waqf properties in that state.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah, and then, they wanted some kind of national level supervision.
Right.
So in 1964, they created the Central Waqf Council of India.
So that's the CWC.
It's CWC, right?
Okay.
And their job was to kind of keep an eye on the state Waqf boards, make sure things were running smoothly.
So it's not like the CWC is calling the shots, like telling the states what to do, right?
No, not at all. It's more like, they offer advice, guidance, recommendations.
Okay, so more like a watchdog.
Exactly, yeah.
So we have the 1954 Act, we have the SWBs, we have the CWC. That's a lot of change in a short period of time. What happened next?
Well, nothing stays the same forever, right? So there were a bunch of amendments made to the 1954 Act over the next few decades.
Like how many?
Let's see. There was one in 59, another in 64, then 69, and then one more in 84.
Wow, so they were constantly tweaking it?
Yeah, they were trying to improve it, make it more efficient, based on what they were seeing.
Right, so it wasn't like set it and forget it.
No, it was a constant process.
Okay, so what prompted all these changes?
Well, they were learning as they went.
Okay.
They'd see something wasn't working, or maybe there was a loophole, and they'd try to fix it.
Right, so kind of like a trial and error sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah, trying to find what worked best.
So where does that bring us?
Well, all those tweaks and adjustments led to a pretty big overhaul in 1995.
Oh, yeah, the Comprehensive Act.
Yeah, the Waqf Act of 1995, that one was a game changer. It basically repealed the old 1954 Act and all its amendments and created this whole new unified legal framework.
Okay, so it's like scrap everything, we're starting fresh.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so what were the big changes in this new act?
So first off, they created these Waqf tribunals.
I've heard of those, but I don't really know what they do.
Yeah, so they're like special courts, specifically for dealing with Waqf disputes.
Okay.
So, if there's a disagreement about a property or something, it goes to the Waqf tribunal.
Okay.
And here's the thing. Their decisions were final.
Yeah. Okay.
You couldn't just appeal it to a regular court.
Okay, so they really wanted to keep it separate.
Exactly. They wanted quick and efficient resolution with people who are experts in Waqf matters.
Makes sense. What else?
They also changed the makeup of the state Waqf boards a little bit.
Okay.
They made sure there were representatives from the state government, from Muslim lawmakers. They had legal experts, Islamic scholars, even people who were managing Waqf properties themselves.
Okay, so a pretty diverse group.
Yeah, they wanted to make sure everyone had a voice at the table.
Okay, so that's 1995. We're getting closer to the present day.
Right, and laws are never really done. They keep evolving.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
So what happened next?
Well, in 2013, they passed the Waqf Amendment Act.
Okay.
And that introduced some more changes.
Like what?
Well, for one, they said that the Waqf tribunals, they had to have 3 members, and one of them had to be an expert in Muslim law.
Okay, so they really wanted to make sure that aspect was covered.
Absolutely. They also said that every state Waqf board had to have at least 2 women members.
Okay, so that's a good step.
Yeah, more inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And then they did something pretty big. They banned the sale or gifting of Waqf properties.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And they also extended the lease period.
Lease period.
Yeah. So before, you could only lease a Waqf property for 3 years.
Oh, okay.
But they changed it to 30 years.
Wow, that's a big difference.
Yeah, they wanted to make it more practical, to encourage better use of the properties.
Okay, so that brings us to the present day and this controversial new bill.
The 2025 one?
Yeah, the one that everyone's talking about.
Yeah, it's making waves.
So what's the government saying about it? Why are they doing this?
Well, according to them, it's all about modernizing the system.
Oh, okay.
Making it more efficient, reducing legal disputes, increasing transparency, and protecting people's rights.
Okay, so on the surface, it sounds like good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want a more efficient system?
Exactly.
But, the devil's in the details, right?
So what are those details? What are the actual changes they're proposing that are making people so upset?
Okay, so one big change is how they determine whether a property is actually a Waqf property.
Okay.
So before, they could rely on, what people said, like oral declarations, or just the fact that the community had been using the property for a long time.
Right, like a historical claim.
Exactly. But now they're saying you need documents. You need valid documents.
Okay, so paperwork.
Paperwork, yeah.
And why is that a problem?
Well, a lot of these properties have been used by communities for generations, but they might not have the official paperwork.
Right, because it was just, like, understood.
Exactly. So now their status is in question.
And what happens if, like, the government claims the land too?
Well, that's the thing. The bill says the government gets to decide.
Wow. Okay, so that's a huge shift in power.
It is, and it's making a lot of people nervous.
So that's one big change. What else is causing concern?
Well, another big one is who gets to be on the Waqf boards and tribunals.
Okay.
They're proposing that non-Muslims could be appointed.
Oh, wow. So that's a big break from tradition.
It is, and some people are worried that non-Muslims might not fully understand Muslim law and customs.
Right, so it's a representation issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what about the courts? I heard they're changing something about that too.
Yeah, so right now, remember how I said the Waqf tribunal's decisions were final?
Yeah.
Well, they want to allow for appeals to regular courts.
Oh, so basically undoing that whole thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
And why is that controversial?
Well, some people think it's going to clog up the courts.
Okay.
And it'll make it harder to resolve these Waqf disputes quickly.
Right, so it's like taking a step backward.
That's how some people see it, yeah.
Okay, so we have the paperwork issue, the representation issue, the court issue. What else?
Well, they also want to create this centralized registration system.
Okay.
So all Waqf properties would have to be registered within 6 months.
And what's wrong with that? Seems like a good way to keep track of everything.
Well, in theory, it is.
Okay.
But the problem is a lot of these properties aren't registered.
What? How many are we talking about?
Well, remember that number? 8.72 lakh properties.
Yeah.
Well, they've only got ownership documents for a tiny fraction of those.
Wow, so most of them aren't registered.
Exactly.
So this could cause chaos.
Yeah, I mean, imagine you have a small mosque that's been there for 100 years, but no one ever bothered to register it.
Right.
Now, suddenly, it's in legal limbo.
So this whole registration thing, it's like a good idea in theory, but in practice, it could be a nightmare.
Yeah, it could create more problems than it solves.
And last but not least, what's this about the government surveying Waqf properties?
Yeah, so the bill gives the government more power to survey these properties.
Okay.
And some people are worried that this is just another way for the government to exert control.
Okay, so it's like first they need documents, then they can survey. It's like they're building a case to take over these properties.
That's the fear. Yeah.
So it's no wonder people are upset.
No, it's a very sensitive issue.
So the government's saying it's about modernization and transparency, but the opposition is saying it's an attack on their rights.
Exactly. It's a clash of perspectives.
And we've seen some pretty strong statements from opposition leaders, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, some are even calling it unconstitutional. They're saying it's a blatant attempt to undermine minority rights.
And this isn't just coming from, like, fringe groups, right? These are mainstream politicians.
Yeah, I mean, you've got people like Mallikarjun Kharge from the Congress Party.
Right.
He pointed out how many votes were against the bill, even in Parliament.
So there's significant opposition.
Oh, yeah. It's not just a few people grumbling.
And Assaduddin Owaisi, he's been very vocal about this.
Yeah, he's even gone to the Supreme Court to challenge it.
Wow, so this is a big legal battle brewing.
It is, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
So it's clear that there are serious concerns about this bill. But even before this, there were already efforts to improve how Waqf properties were managed, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what were they doing?
Well, the Ministry of Minority Affairs, they had a few schemes in place.
Okay.
One was called the Kwame Waqf Board Tarakukwati Scheme, or QWBTS for short.
Okay, what's that one about?
So it's basically about modernizing the state Waqf boards.
Okay.
Giving them money to computerize their records, things like that. Okay, so making them more efficient.
Exactly.
What else?
They also had the Shahari Waqf Sampati Vikas Yojana, or SWSVY.
Okay, another acronym.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, but basically, this scheme was about helping Waqf boards develop commercial projects.
Okay, interesting.
So they could generate income from their properties.
So not just like managing the properties, but actually using them to benefit the community.
Exactly, yeah.
And were these schemes actually working?
Well, they were putting money where their mouth was.
Okay.
Between 2019 and 2024, they spent crores of rupees on these initiatives.
Wow, so it wasn't just like a token effort.
No, they were serious about it.
So it's interesting, right? They're trying to improve things on the one hand, but then on the other hand, they introduced this bill that seems to be undermining those efforts.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed message.
So to wrap things up, I just want to go back to those numbers one last time. 8.72 lakh properties. 38 lakh acres, that's just mind-boggling.
It's a massive amount of land, yeah. Are there any states that, like, really stand out in terms of how much Waqf property they have?
Yeah, so Uttar Pradesh, they've got the most Waqf properties, like in terms of number.
Okay.
But Madhya Pradesh, they've got the most in terms of area.
Okay, so it's not evenly distributed.
No, not at all.
So as we're wrapping up this this deep dive into the world of Waqf laws,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways?
Yeah.
What should people remember?
Well, I think the main thing is that this is a complex issue.
Yeah, for sure.
These laws have been evolving for over a century, and they're still changing.
Right.
And this new bill, it's a big deal. It's a major shift.
Yeah.
But it's also causing a lot of anxiety and uncertainty.
Yeah, it's like modernization is good,
Mm-hmm.
but not at the expense of people's rights.
Exactly. It's all about finding the right balance.
And that's the question we leave you with today. How will this new legal framework affect the role of Waqf properties in Indian society?
Yeah, how will it impact the lives of the people who rely on these properties?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.
See ya!